We all hear what problems the United States has, but in comparison to China, the United States doesn't have that many problems. China has real problems. An example of this is the cumulative national debt. The United States cumulative national debt that we've collected so far in all our history is $32 trillion, which is a lot. It's about 123% of our gross national product. China's cumulative national grand debt is 52 trillion, which is 300% of their gross domestic product. So there's really no comparison. China is economically far behind the United States. And their stock market does not do as well as the United States. Our stock market year to date, let's say it's up 15%, okay? China's stock market is down about 10% and looks to be getting worse as they are going into recession. China is the world's biggest polluter. They are responsible for 30% of the world's total emissions of pollution. And they have made efforts to clean things up. They're into solar energy. They're doing a lot of things right to try to clean it up because it is really a problem that they recognize. And they've improved. 10 years ago, you could not see the sky in the capital of China, which is Beijing. And now you can at least see the sky and breathe the air without choking to death. It's come to the point where China doing poorly actually helps the United States to a certain extent because their currency gets devalued. It's now 7.3 yuan to the dollar. That's the Chinese currency, 7.3 yuan to the dollar. And so it makes things cheaper for us that we buy from China, which helps our inflation. So their misfortune, while they're in recession, they're sort of having a recession to help our inflation in some ways. A strange world. So China's going into recession. Is it going to throw the world into recession? I sort of doubt it, because to an extent, it does the United States, certainly does the United States a favor. For instance, because they're in recession, they use less oil, and so the price of oil is cheaper, which then helps our inflation quite a bit. They don't have inflation right now because they are in recession. Their CPI is a negative 0.3%. So we really have very contrasting worlds. You can see the very different two worlds we live in, where the United States has raised the interest rate to 5.5%, while the Chinese have lowered their interest rates to 2.5%. And in some ways, it seems like China is going through a version of what we went through in 2008 with the Great Recession, only it looks to be much worse. In China, the main way they see getting rich is to own real estate, okay? And that's what people did. They poured all their money into buying homes. And there's pictures from China of just blocks, and I want to say almost miles, of these skyscrapers of empty apartment buildings. It's just amazing. And they somehow figured out a way to have people start paying for the houses or their apartments or condominiums or whatever they are, start paying for their places of residence before they were completed. And so there's lots of Chinese that have been pouring money into these empty buildings, but then the developers have started to go broke, and many are close to being very broke. Evergrande, which is a very large real estate developer, is now a penny stock. It's down like 97% from its peak. So, and this affects so many things in their lives. I mean, there's more men than women in China because they had the one child policy for so long to try to reduce their population, and they were successful. But now they've got 30% of the population over 60, and then the young people that there are, people in the 16 to 24 range, they're 20% unemployed. Now, that's probably an exaggeration because they count people in college as being unemployed somehow. But anyway, you've got way less young people to support an elderly population, and it's growing. There's 400 million elderly Chinese over 60. That it will be that way by 2035. You'll have 400 million Chinese over the age of 60. And the number of young people keeps being reduced because you have a population that's expected to help take care of elderly parents and grandparents while they're having trouble finding work, which I find somewhat puzzling. You would think with a communist guided capitalism that is in China, you would think there would be almost full employment. In fact, I used to just think automatically it would be full employment because the Communist Party would push full employment so much, but that's somehow not the case, and I can't quite figure that one out. But it's a real problem. And this is to me, it's so ironic. When I was a teenager, which is decades ago, of course, the story was that the world is going to be overpopulated and we were going to have people everywhere and we would just all die of starvation. And that just is not happening. And now you have people like Elon Musk talking about the underpopulation problem. And it's even being said that we're in better shape. The United States is in better shape than Europe is, let's say, as far as having population growth. And it's because of Mexico. You know, people complain about all the problems that are caused by Mexico's illegal immigration, I want to say, is the problem. But in the long run, that actually helps our economic growth. It causes problems right now, but we will get through it, and hopefully we will resolve it so it's less of a problem. But if we want the growth, if we can have it on a steady basis and not these peaks and troughs. But actually, Mexico is an asset to the United States, and I think we will be thankful for that in the future. The current administration in the White House has gotten increasingly disillusioned with China. Biden has called China a ticking time bomb. Secretary of Commerce Raimondo has said that China is almost uninvestable because they do things like they put exorbitant fines on companies, on United States companies, without explanation, you know. And there's a lack of transparency and a certain amount of corruption that is going on with the stock market, we suspect. So these things, it makes me stay away from Chinese stocks generally. And I think a lot of people are coming to that point of view because you just don't exactly know what's going on with China. And one handicap I think China has, and it's a major one, is their political system emphasizes conformity. You know, that they want to bring the population up, everybody up together, okay? And there's less tolerance for individual differences. They want to assimilate the people of Tibet into Chinese culture and force Chinese culture on Tibetans, and particularly the Tibetan children, in which the United States has taken great offense at. Uh, we have our problems with different ethnicities and making sure everybody has a seat at the table. But I think they're far less. And I think we are in the process of working on it, whereas China is in the process of trying to force the solution. Our our solution is to recognize the individual differences, accept them, and blend it into a working society where we build each other up because of our differences, and we're stronger because of that. We don't try to make everybody the same. Our emphasis is on the individual, and China's emphasis is more on the group and bringing the group up. And that's good for increasing the standard of living and so forth. But I think what the United States is somewhat unique, or at least to a greater degree than most other countries. We tend to produce very creative people with unique abilities because we have honored their differences and encouraged their differences. And it's kind of do your own thing and do what's best for you, not what society wants to force on you. And I think that will always be part of the United States vibrancy, and God bless America, right? And the true ticking bomb is how their population is going to be decreased substantially. And I can't even believe I'm worrying about China's population. You would think 1.5 billion people would be enough, right? but their fertility rate, it's all about replacement and having enough replacement to support the elderly population. Their fertility rate is only 1.2, and you need 2.0 to have full replacement of the population. And it would be better if it were closer to 2, like 1.8 or so. And also the fact that there's about 105 men to each 100 women, because they valued men more, especially when you had a single child policy. They tended to make sure they had more men than women babies, which women have the babies, and if you have less women, you're going to have less population replacement. China's recession is not without some consequences for the United States. And if it got really bad, it would certainly affect the United States. Companies like Nike and Caterpillar and even Apple, they do a lot of business in China. And if that continues and it gets more severe, it's going to affect their bottom line a lot. And the luxury goods dealers like Louis Vuitton and Gucci, there's some very rich, crazy Asians, as the movie said, that recently came out, that buy lots of luxury goods from the United States. So it definitely will affect us if it would go as far as to go into a depression or something awful. I'm old enough that I've seen a lot of things come and go. In the 1950s and 60s, Russia was going to overtake us. They were on par with us, and they were going to bury us, as Nikita Khrushchev threatened us. And then in the 80s, Japan couldn't be stopped, and they were going to take over the automotive industry and leave us in the dust. and that was just ridiculous. And now we have China, and China is anything but invincible. And in many ways, they feel surrounded by the United States, with the Philippines, Taiwan, and Australia, and a lot of the Southeastern Asian countries strongly allied with us. uh, to some extent, that they're fighting to be able to break away from the United States influence. And China is also changing from being a major manufacturer into gradually being more of an importer and having an upper middle and very rich class that consumes goods. So they're changing, and I think it's going to be interesting. I think they're in competition and they're a rival of the United States, but I think it's a long time before they ever will overpower or equal our influence in the world. I don't think the dollar is going to be, I think the dollar is going to be the reserve currency for a long time. As much of a mess we are in, every other country is in more of a mess. And somehow we seem to grow out of our mess. And it's our tolerance for confusion and chaos that we produce these wondrous individuals that are very creative and do quantum leaps in technology that truly change the world. Thanks for listening and watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll keep trying to bring you the topics that inform your investing. I think China is a problem. I think the United States is skirting this problem rather well, and I think we're going to nearshoring. We're giving more business to Canada and Mexico. How about that? Let's do more business with North America. I mean, they're kind of our neighbors, right? And also we're doing more business with India and companies like Tesla and Apple are interested in doing more business with India, which I think is a good thing. Thank you.